I'm tired of writing about another black man or woman that's dying. I am tired of it. I am so freaking tired of it.
Live from a huge social distance.
It's a very big distance.
Very, very big distance. Welcome to Call and Response, everybody. We've been talking about it for a little bit, and now we are going to be it. How do you feel, Mike?
A little nervous, but also very excited. But those two feelings are probably very related. How are you feeling, Baron?
I'm also feeling very good. A teacher used to tell me that terrific and terrifying have the exact same root for a reason.
That's real.
Because they both go to the root of
Terra.
you.
Terra. That's
Terra.
Like Earth or something. I remember Latin. I remember that.
You're probably right. You're probably exactly right about the Latin roots of that. We'll have to get some sort of linguist in here.
That's true.
To really waste everybody else's time.
We got a bunch of different kinds of people coming in, though. So one of them might be a linguist, a hobbyist linguist.
People have skill sets that we don't even know. You know,
Exactly.
like Mike, you've got like 14, 15 skill sets that I probably don't know about.
You know, one of them is not electrical wiring. So that's been fun for me this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can understand that too. Yeah. I mean, I have a little bit of trouble with that. Not as much as my wife. But without having to become a comedian from 1991.
I got
and
you.
being like,
wife. Yeah,
my wife. Am I right? All I ever learned about comedians from the 90s and beforehand is they hated their wives.
Yeah, sure. They made that very apparent.
It's 100 years of stand-up comedy, just woman hate.
But what about the here and now, Baron?
Well,
we're doing call and response.
We are doing call and response.
In
yes.
response to the moment that we're living in. And I just want to get a sense, before we talk to anybody else, like, where are you at in all of this? How are you feeling?
Well, I don't think there's a real easy question for that. I feel like I'm sort of where everybody else is. Like, I think that the feeling of the time right now is not knowing how to feel.
Gotcha.
But I also think that is important and informative, because if something happens and you know exactly how to feel about it, you're probably off.
Right.
Like, we don't have just all of the programming to know how to react to every single thing that's happening, which is one of the reasons we're doing this show.
Right.
Because we don't know how to react. We
True.
assume that there's a bunch of people out there who don't know how to react, that need some knowledge, that have some questions, that are curious like us, right?
And I think that's dead on, too, because a big component of everything that's going on right now, and this is from the pandemic to the death of George Floyd and the protests and everything that's followed, is that we, especially if you're in the Black community, you can be feeling so much right now and not really know how to process it, not really feel like you have an outlet for it. So one of the purposes of this show is to have conversations to help us and help each other kind of process the moment, right?
Right. This is the community meeting, y'all. You're our community. We're here to meet. We're here to talk. We're here to talk some shit.
Yeah. Some shit will be talked.
Shit will be talked. You know what? I'm not going to sing. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah, but you are. You're gonna. So you might as well.
It's because, Mike, you and I are on some sort of delay.
True.
So there's no that musical,
the timing.
The musical timing that we get. We can't do it right here. And I'm just going to look like an asshole, just like doing bastardized gospel songs. Shit will be talked. Well, and that's, nobody wants to hear that, even though that's kind of catchy. Come on,
I feel like we should do a versus now. You should be TD Jakes and I should be Kirk Franklin or something, and we should just do a fake versus, right? Now that's what's hot in the streets. Versus.
TD Jakes and Kirk Franklin come together now. All right. Hey, and by the way, this is a space where everybody's probably going to know who TD Jakes and Kirk Franklin are. You know what I mean? So if you don't know who they are, you're welcome, but we know who they are, and we hope that you'll find out. So, yeah, what about you, man? How you feeling? How you taking in?
I'm really trying to sit with the feelings of what it means whenever we see one of our own killed by police.
Can't even watch those videos anymore.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. You know, there's the outrage, and then there's like an outrage, like being overwhelmed by the outrage from it happening year after year after year. You just don't know how to feel. And I think, you know, I've kind of identified something that makes it extra angering to me, or gives it a little bit of a extra sense of overwhelming, is that there's this thing that happens when the police murder somebody, especially if it's by any means unfair, which is kind of what it feels like, right?
Which is usually what it is.
It is usually what it is, and you know, you can kind of eyeball and be like, oh, this seems to happen to black people at an unfair rate. But part of the difficulty of it is society on a whole, especially if you live in a capitalist society. Like you see commercials and hear commercials all day that make you feel really special.
That's the whole point of a commercial.
Exactly. They make you feel like your individual happiness, comfort, your money is of the utmost importance. And so we all kind of walk around feeling this sense that we're all special. And when the arm of the state, the police that's meant to serve and protect, takes one of our lives, and there's usually no outright punishment for it, it really goes against that feeling. Like, wait a minute, not only am I not special, I am like less special. Like I must not be anything. And you know, hence us having to say Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, I mean, you know, Richard Pryor is one of my favorite comedians of all time. And, you know, there's a handful of comedians, obviously, that have always been reacting to the time that they're in. And it's crazy to listen to Richard Pryor and be like, he's talking about yesterday. You know, it's the same for all these different authors. You know, it's crazy to read somebody like Angela Davis or Du Bois and be like, are they talking about tomorrow? Like it's all these issues are still important and still matter. And I think, and you know, I'm also willing to admit I might be incorrect, because I want to ask some of our guests how they feel about what I'm about to say. It feels like we've come to some particular kind of moment. And I hate to say that word, because there's something about, I feel like I'm hearing everyone saying that this is a moment, and it starts to become cheap to me. And I kind of see it like this is not necessarily a moment, but there's a specific momentum that is unlike what I have seen in my lifetime, which I can only compare to the civil rights movement of the 60s. And with that, do you mind if I, you know, dazzle you with how I'm going to tie this into our guest introduction?
Oh, I'm with it. Okay.
So in the civil rights movement of the 60s, obviously a lot of things happened. Obviously, we just saw that news the other day about the act from 1964 that is going to be applied to trans people, you know, LGBT people, and it means that there's discrimination that they were facing at work, which is now classified as actually illegal, which is a amazing thing. But if I can be controversial for a minute, you know, there has been, and I've always been aware of, the talk of the civil rights movement in the 60s diminishing the women that were part of the movement, right? So, you know, I was talking about comedians doing a whole decade or a whole century's worth of woman hating, but I am of the firm belief that women are the people who are going to lead us through this, you know. And when I say women, I don't just mean cisgendered women, you know, I mean trans women, I mean non-binary, you know, people who identify as non-binary. They are going to, and I feel like women are picking up the mantle from the civil rights movement, no longer being voices that are diminished, you know, or pushed to the side, or pushed to the back, and they are picking up the mantle and heading forward. And we have two fantastic guests today that are prime examples of how that is going to be. Do you want to introduce our first guest, or should I do it?
I mean, you're on such a roll. I thought you were doing it already.
I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll like it's a 20-sided die, brah. What? How many black people got Dungeons and Dragons references out there, huh?
I didn't
That's
have
three
friends,
charisma.
So, yeah.
What'd you say?
I said I didn't have friends that did that, so I was never able to get down with it.
I played ghetto D&D. It was
Fun.
less about the role playing and more about the dice. Don't forget, I grew up in Las Vegas. Okay, our first guest coming to the digital stage today, tonight, this morning, this afternoon, whatever time of day it is. It's all meaningless now in this pandemic America. This person is a professor of Pan-African Studies. She is also a founding member of the Los Angeles chapter of Black Lives Matter. You may, if you are following the news and you're following what's happening around the country and specifically in LA, you may have heard of her before. So please welcome Melina Abdullah, everybody.
Jackie Lacey literally has blood on her hands. She showed us exactly who she is. But guess what? We ain't killers, but we do hold people accountable. Everything that she put out.
Thank you for having me.
Even though you didn't have to technically go anywhere.
I had to open the computer though.
We're excited that you turned your computer in our direction. It means a lot to us.
So where to start? I mean, obviously there's a lot happening. You are mixed up in a lot of different things, but I guess I want to start by talking about the protest that happened in Hollywood on June 7th. It was a peaceful protest that you could say took a turn. Would you like to talk about that with us?
Well, I won't say it took a turn. I will say that it was beautiful to have 100,000 folks on the streets in Hollywood, all chanting defund the police, all chanting Black Lives Matter, being willing to really step in and demand real justice, saying things like, you know, the policing system in this country cannot be reformed. It needs to be transformed. And I thought there was just so much power in that. We also were able to do a small memorial on the corner of Hollywood and Highland to remember who we're fighting for, to invoke those names. And so it was just awesome. I had my 3 children with me. We were happy to be with Build Power and Kendrick Sampson, happy that YG was out with us, and you know, it was a turn up.
Fantastic. And I apologize, I misspoke before. I meant, you know, I was referencing the protest before that, so I apologize for that.
Oh, the week before when the police attacked us?
Yeah, when the police rioted? Yeah, that's
right. When the police, beat us and sprayed us with pepper spray and shot our folks with rubber bullets. Yeah, that was a turn for sure.
Yeah, and the protest on the 7th is what it was always going to be if the police did not, if you will, rear their ugly heads into the whole situation.
Right. And we've been, to be clear, we've been out in the streets every day. And it's always, when they talk about violence, it's always perpetuated and initiated by the police. And so it's really important that we think about what's happening as we're protesting police brutality. We're experiencing police brutality.
It's really something interesting. You know, we both live in LA, me and Baron do, and I've been around this city a long time. I was around here, you know, in '92, and it seems like, you know, LA has kind of been on the forefront of, you know, erupting an uprising at these sorts of events. And you know, I'm wondering for you, has there been any particular like challenges that you feel organizing in LA, where everything's kind of so spread out, versus, you know, challenges that LA faces versus other places when it comes to organizing?
Actually, I think that LA sometimes gets a bad rap because they act like people in LA don't want to get up, but we got to remember the Watts uprising was LA, right? The 92 uprising was LA, right? You had a significant presence in the Black Power movement from LA. When we talk about people like Geronimo Jijaga Pratt, that's LA, right? So it's important to remember what comes out of LA. Black Lives Matter was born in LA. And so it's really important to kind of dispel those narratives. I think that LA presents a lot of opportunities because we do have this platform that other cities don't necessarily have. And I also want to say that, you know, that platform is sometimes manipulated by those who want to minimize the voice of LA. So if you think about what LAPD does, for instance, the most murderous police force in the country, what they do is try to gloss over their killings. And so, for instance, in this moment right now, you got the police chief and the mayor saying they mourn the death of George Floyd, but do you mourn the death of Grishario Mack? But do you mourn the death of 14-year-old Jesse Romero? Do you mourn the death of Riddell Jones, right? So it's easy to say, oh, that's terrible what's happening in Minneapolis. But at the same time, they're ignoring that last week, LAPD killed 3 people in 5 days, right? We had one day where police killed 4 people in a single day. And so it's really important that we think about how they're misusing PR, how they're doing things to try to gloss over the tremendous organizing that's happening in LA.
I want to speak to that for a second. Just, in my experience, I'm going to speak to my experience in LA. I feel like it's easy to kind of go through your day doing what you do and kind of being out of the loop. Like those murders you just mentioned, like I had no awareness of that. I'm wondering, for somebody who wants to be in the loop, what do you think is the best way to get them where they're getting that flow of information?
Sure. So the media is showing stuff just right now, just for a moment, right? Please follow Black Lives Matter social media. So BLM-LA.org is our website, BLM-LA on Twitter, BLM Los Angeles on Instagram. We have to kind of democratize the information sharing, right? That if you rely on mainstream media, you are not going to get the information. And so it's really important that you plug in with alternative sources, also independent media. So KPFK, which is a Pacifica station, sisters like Dominique DiPrima on KJLH on the front page lift up really what's happening. But make sure that you plug in. You have to seek it out. Most people don't know that we just had 2 Black men lynched in Southern California in the last week. So Robert Fuller in Palmdale and Malcolm Harsh in Victorville, which for people who are not from LA, should know that those are both LA. It's where Black people were driven when the cost of housing got too high for us to afford. We had to move out to the IE or move out to the Antelope Valley.
And if I can expand on those things a little bit, I wanted to talk to you about defunding the police and also the people's budget. So you've been very instrumental in bringing those things together. Can you talk on those a little bit?
So let me say, because we fight so hard, we're always mad and sometimes upset. And today is a great day. Ooh, y'all cuss on it. It's a great ass day.
Hell yes.
Yes.
So this morning, so yesterday, we were finally invited to present the people's budget to LA City Council. We do have one council member who's been kind of amplifying what we're doing. So Herb Wesson, who's one of the 3 Black city council members, came out first in favor of the Black LA demands, then came out fairly supportive of People's Budget LA. People's Budget LA is really the culmination of 5 years of work. Every year we protest the mayor's budget, which every year spends more than 50% of the city's general fund on straight up police, LAPD, because they have this expansionist view of policing when they got police doing everything that they don't know how to do. Right. So police are sitting up talking about they're serving as social workers and EMTs and drug rehab counselors. Well, they shouldn't be, because they don't know how to do those jobs. They were not created to do those jobs. And so we've been pushing back every year. This year we were especially outraged because we're dealing with a public health pandemic with an economic fallout. Crime is plummeting. Why are you spending more on police? So this mayor tried to cut every other city department, furlough 16,000 city workers, most of whom are Black and brown, and then increase the LAPD budget to spend $3.15 billion on police. Ooh. So we said we're going to do things differently. We're going to put out an alternative budget. We were invited yesterday to present that alternative budget, which emphasizes defunding the police, We presented it at City Council yesterday. Today, that same council member who I mentioned, Herb Wesson, put forward a motion that says police will not be deployed for nonviolent calls.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
So
Very
this
fantastic.
just came out like an hour ago in the talk, right? Now, this is what he's putting forward. It's a motion he's putting forward. There are 15 members of the LA City Council. It has to pass.
Right.
Mhm.
So we got to work on getting it passed. But the end of the presentation yesterday, we challenged them and said, you know, whose are you, right? Not just who are you.
Whose are
you?
Mhm.
Do you belong to the LA Police Protective League? Do you belong to your own political ambitions? Do you belong to your ego, or do you belong to the people?
Wow.
And so we encourage them to take courageous action, and we see that this motion is courageous action, and courageous action is happening all around the country. Minneapolis disbanding their police department, school districts all up and down the state and throughout the country ending their relationships with police. So those are the things that we're pushing for, and we're really excited about.
You know, one thing that people...
Wait, hold on, Mike. Let's just recognize that for 5 seconds. Like that is incredible, tremendous work. I just want to recognize that. So I'm sorry, Mike, for interrupting, but go ahead.
One thing that people have a challenge with sometimes is just words and ideas like defunding the police. And you know what you just brought up was a really excellent example of what's meant by that operationally, because it's not about, you know, completely removing the idea of having the government to you know, having an arm of the government that helps out in those sorts of situations. It's about the style, and it's about the approach. So like you just explained,
because the style and approach has been quite murderous.
Exactly. And what you just explained, police would not be called out for non-violent incidents. So what exactly is the plan there? If it's not police to come out for non-violent incidents, who is sent in their place?
So this is the other thing, right? It's really common sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if someone is having a mental health challenge, wouldn't you want mental health workers to come out? If that was the case, if they had deployed therapists when Rosario Mack was having a break in the Crenshaw Mall, they could have talked with him. They could have helped him. Even the security in the mall were saying, you know, we just wanted to talk with him. We just wanted to remove him from the mall. He wasn't arrestable. It wasn't anything he was doing that should have been a crime. If we deployed mental health workers, Rosario Mack wouldn't have been shot to death inside the Crenshaw Baldwin Hills Mall in front of hundreds and hundreds of shoppers, including children, right? If we think about, you know, those kinds of things, if we think about if we'd had social workers when Jesse Romero was accused of tagging, right? Then this 14-year-old child who hadn't even made it to high school yet, it was the summer after his 8th grade year, would still be here, right? If we think about Brother Africa, who was murdered on Skid Row, then don't we need things like, what if we had housing for Brother Africa?
Exactly.
Right? Then he would still be alive, and they wouldn't have been allowed to steal his life. So we have to couple this call to defund the police with reimagining public safety. So we want to live in safe communities, but we know that safety for Black people has never come through police. Safety for Black people comes through building community resources, making sure that our folks have all of what they need and most of what they want so they can step into their fullest selves, right? And so we're saying we want a strong system of public safety that's rooted in making sure that we have what we need and making sure that we have solid communities that can address our own issues.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And from my experience, it's always seemed that, like, in Black communities, there has always been sort of a de facto community policing, in some sort of sense, where it's like people from the church, like I remember people who own grocery stores that like they become pillars of the community, and everyone gets to know each other. There becomes a trust, and a communication that's different than somebody else with a gun coming in to do a job that doesn't need a gun at all.
Right.
Whew.
Everybody had that mama who sat on the porch.
Yes.
Miss Rose in my neighborhood. And if you messed up, Miss Rose would snatch you up and she might give you a little whooping and then tell your mama, and your mama would give you a whooping, right? But police were never called, right? Police weren't called for naughty kids who were cussing on their way home from school, right? You got snatched up onto the porch. My mother was one of those folks. My mother used to sit on the porch and teach all the kids in the neighborhood to read, right? And what does that do? Like, they would hear my mother's car hit the block because she drove a real old Volvo station wagon, and you could hear it coming. And all the kids in the neighborhood would run down to our porch and yell, "Time for school!" And my mom would sit on the porch until dusk and teach the kids to read.
Wow.
That's public safety.
It's also beautiful. It's also a perfect example of Black lives thriving. That's gorgeous.
Yes.
Mike, did you have any other questions? I think we got to wrap it up in a little bit. I got a couple more.
I got one. So you're the co-founder of Black Lives Matter LA, and that got me to thinking, like, what does it mean to be a chapter of Black Lives Matter? Like, there's another city in the country that wants to organize and be a part of it. What steps do they need to take to establish themselves as a chapter in Black Lives Matter? Sure.
So Black Lives Matter was founded like here in Los Angeles. And so we're the first chapter, right? In 2014, a bunch of chapters emerged, and we're all bound together by a set of guiding principles. So there's certain things that we adhere to as Black Lives Matter, like we believe in disrupting the system of white supremacy, not just trying to find a comfortable place in it, right? We believe in the entering the movement as our whole and complete selves. So one of the reasons I can do this work as a single mom of 3 children is my kids just come with me everywhere, and it politicizes them and empowers them in the process. So chapters of Black Lives Matter adhere to this set of guiding principles. We're all in communication with one another. If there's a city that does not have a Black Lives Matter chapter, there's a process by which they can apply for membership. But we're kind of working on what our onboarding process looks like right now. We just chartered Black Lives Matter South Bend right after kind of as Pete Buttigieg was running for office. They were doing a turn up in the name of Eric Logan, who was murdered as Pete Buttigieg was running for office, right? And so we kind of onboarded them and began doing work with them. But it really depends on what different communities are doing. And then there's also the larger movement for Black Lives, which is not all Black Lives Matter. It includes other organizations like Dream Defenders and BYP 100 and others.
Yes. I'm actually happy you brought those up, because I wanted you to be able to, in the tradition of hip hop, shout out a couple other organizations if you wanted to. Do you want to? Besides BYP 100, go ahead, please do.
Sure. BYP 100, Black Youth Project 100. There's Dream Defenders. There's Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. There is just lots of work moving nationally and globally that speaks to the empowerment of Black people, to building Black community, and to disrupting white supremacy.
Well, I mean, everything you said just went into my heart. Mike, do you have another question, or can I wrap this up?
No, you can go on here, brother.
Now, open mic.
Wait. Can I ask you? Because I see a little chat question about Jackie Lacey. So,
yes.
So also in hip hop tradition, I never want to miss the chance to amplify this beef.
Yes.
Oh,
bars. Go ahead.
Jackie Lacey is the absolute worst district attorney in this country.
Wow.
She's one of those happens to be Black people, but we know in the tradition and in the words of Zora Neale Hurston, all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Oh, wait.
Since Jackie Lacey was elected to office in 2013, 609 people have been killed by police in LA County. She chooses not to prosecute those officers. So we got a chance to get rid of Jackie Lacey. We got a whole little chant about it, but we say Jackie Lacey must go. Jackie Lacey will go. Killer cops ain't funny. New DA for 2020. So on November 3rd, 2020, we are voting Jackie Lacey out of office in the names of those 609 people whose murders have been brought during her tenure and who she refuses to hold those killer cops accountable.
Oof, all
It's
right.
kind of beef I can get behind. I
can get behind that. And ending up here, I wanted to tell you something I love about Open Mike Eagle. Open Mike Eagle is a fantastic hip hop artist, and one of the things that I love about Mike is that he is a very good reporter of the human condition, right? When you listen to his music, you really understand who he is and what he's going through. And we're all fans of hip hop here. So I wanted to ask you, who are some of your favorite reporters of the human condition, and also some of your favorite reporters of what's happening in the streets? Sometimes it's both, is it not?
Yes. So I'm telling my age because I said, don't ask me about no new stuff, right?
You did, even though you shouted out YG.
Right. Well, YG was out in the streets with us.
Right.
And, how can you be mad at fuck Donald Trump, right?
Yes.
So I love Rakim. So Rakim, my kids are tested on Rakim regularly.
Lovely.
So who's not talked about enough?
Preach.
Is Whodini.
Ooh.
Beautiful music.
I love Whodini, and so they're regularly tested on Whodini. But if I have to go with somebody, it's the Coup. And I know some folks don't know who I'm talking about, but there's a song by the Coup, who people do know Boots Riley now.
Yes.
Called Fat Cats Bigger Fish.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
a classic video too.
That video was
Classic
amazing.
video.
Yeah.
You can see that early filmmaking, Boots
Pam the
Riley.
Funkstress, they had a woman DJ, rest in peace,
May she rest
rest
in
in
peace.
power, Pam the Funkstress. But I think the Coup is one of the most brilliant hip hop groups of all time, and they're not played enough.
Woof. Well, Melina Abdullah, thank you very much for your time, your knowledge, your light, and I mean like the smile and the sun that is clearly coming out your heart, and I really appreciate your work so much.
I do too, and I just wanted to say too, as denizens of Los Angeles, like I live right here in Leimert Park.
You down the street.
I know, and I want to be plugged into the movement, so I'm gonna be getting inroads to that in any way I can, and hopefully we'll be walking alongside you in the future.
Sounds great.
I'm far away from that, but I still want to come.
Please
drive.
do. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for
Thank
being
you very
here.
much. Oh my goodness. Melina Abdullah, everybody, professor of Pan-African Studies at CSU LA, also a founding member of Black Lives Matter LA chapter, whatever that means. She's doing things. Please continue to watch the work that she's doing. When we come back, we're going to have our homie Clayton English talk to us about what he's been doing and what he's been going through. Am I right, Mike?
Yes, you is.
Okay, we'll be right back after something. Welcome back to Call and
Response.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you you know me.
Well, you know,
alley-oops,
man. You just put it up. I put it through.
Alley-oop
you know
it. Gotta alley-oop it. That's how you doop it. What? That doesn't make any sense. That was so stupid. Like looped it. Come on, right? Digital Underground. Okay, so coming up next, we have a homie, you know what I mean? Like this is a dude me and Mike know well. We love this dude. He's one of the best stand-up comedians out there, and we're really on the planet.
We're really fortunate that our homies are all like incredibly talented too.
Yes.
So
yes, indeed. And he is from the great city of Atlanta. He was a winner of the show Last Comic Standing. He is a stand-up comedian. He is an activist. Please welcome to the stage Clayton English.
Hey, what's up, man?
What up, man?
What is up? No, I'm. This is good. Y'all are good at doing this. I see why you have a show. I was eating banana chips, enjoying. I almost forgot I was supposed to participate, man.
Wow.
I was finding out so much stuff. I need to go to Melina's protest.
Yes, you do.
Wherever she go, because
Yes, you do. Yes, you
that
do.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Speaking of which, you have been going to some protests, have you not?
Yeah, actually, I've been going to protests. You just want to get into it? Is that what we're doing now?
Why not, Clayton? We can talk about anything. What would you rather talk about right now? You want to talk about something else?
No, I'm just saying. No, definitely. I just go get into it. Yes, I went to protest, but the thing is, I got arrested at a protest that was in front of my house. Like,
what?
Come on, man. Like, come on. Like, I've been to protest earlier. I walked hella miles. Like, we walked probably about 6 miles. And I never really protested like that. I just stood outside of places in Atlanta, but we didn't like march or nothing. And this was like marching. And I thought it was level. I thought it was supposed to be level ground. I didn't realize people was marching up hills. They had on wingtip shoes.
What?
Back then. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, back then.
They had. Yeah, so now it was
nobody had like arch supports. Nothing. It's just hard shoes.
No. They had skateboards, they had unicycles. I'm like, this is a little too whimsical. Like Malcolm.
this ain't what he was fighting for necessarily.
No, Malcolm don't like juggling. I know Malcolm don't like juggling for a fact. It's been in none of the documentaries, but I guarantee you he did not. So I saw it. It was a lot of other types of people, which is great to see.
What you mean other types?
To see. Oh man, white people, Asian people. I saw Hispanic people, like just all types of people that I've never associated with being out there.
Did you get a sense
those type of things went into play for black people?
Did you get a sense that those people was mad about the same things you mad about?
Yeah, like some of them, but then it was some people I just couldn't quite peg down. I was like, I don't know what you out here for, and some people like. You know, and then you got the crazy, ridiculous signs. I'm like, come on, man, that's unnecessary. You don't need to have
too long thinking of the clever sign. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Well, the protest sign is the original tweet. Isn't it? You want to get those RTs.
You're right, but now they got props, and it's.
Tell us what you saw.
Oh yeah, man.
What did you see, Clayton?
A black dildo, man. Come on, man. What are we talking about?
What?
Yes.
What was that supposed to symbolize? I don't understand the message.
It was the phrase that if you open your mouth up for.
Oh yeah, that phrase.
Open your mouth up for racism, and I saw it, but they took it somewhere with props. I'm like, oh, come on now, that's like.
It's just probably children
getting
present,
it
man.
lost. Yeah. It's kids here, man. It's not all about you, and it's not all about that. But anyway.
Well, what was the experience of your arrest like, though?
Okay, so I went to the other protests. I saw when they burned down Melrose and Fairfax. Like, that's not like maybe even less than 2 miles from me. So I was riding around watching people go in stores. Like, we were in the car kind of gambling. Like, you think the Adidas store is going to make it? She was like, nah, Adidas is done. I can't believe they ain't broke in there yet. So, I saw it from that night. And then I'd say about 2 days later, a protest just happened to come past my window. I'm looking out, I'm on the 4th floor, and I see all these young people out there with signs and everything. And I'm like, oh, shit, I got to go out there. Go out there. Keep in mind, this is past the curfew. I go out there. Pretty much everybody in the block is out there recording stuff on their phone. The mistake I made was I didn't stay on my street. I turned the corner with them. I turned the next corner. and I had to make a right, and I would have been back on my street. The police closed off this side. They closed off the other side. I was like, hey, I live right over here. I'm just trying to get home. Police officer gripped on his gun. Get back over there. A line of them was on the other side. It was like, oh, okay, they really trying to take people to jail. And I didn't see any of this the night that the Fairfax district was burned up. I didn't see this any of the night that I saw, the Grove getting broke into. But now, and they're peaceful. These kids was peaceful. Some people laid down. A lady let us in her apartment and told us we could go on the roof. A white lady came out, Laura. She let us in. She only halfway helped her, so she don't get a full shout out because she let us on the roof. Yeah. She let us on the roof. Helicopter comes. We on the news. I'm going live. You can go to my Instagram and look at some of the live videos. I think they're still up there. Yes. Like the helicopter surrounded us. Because just was the day before when the people hid in the lady's house or the man's house in DC, I believe, or either it was New York. And then they got out the next day. They were in shelter. She didn't let us in the apartment. She was like, go on the roof and don't. So the police didn't leave. They circled. They got on the balcony next to us. They're aiming the tear gas canisters up at us.
What?
Eventually they came up with the guns, handcuffed everybody on your stomach, handcuffed us, let us, they said it was going to be a cite and release. And I don't know. I've never been to jail like this. You know what I'm saying? I'm from the South. Yes, I've been in jail for no reason before, but not for no reason. Like curfew, what's next? Am I going to jail? You know what I'm saying? You going to jail for roughhousing. You going to jail for horseplay.
For horseplay?
Curfew? This is a childish crime. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't even understand this. And they like, well, you're going to get cite and release. Well, I'm like, well, give me the cite and release me because I stay right here. And they like, no, you got to go down. Well, I'm like, what jail we going to? They don't know what jail we go to.
Whoa,
we get on the sheriff bus. And there's men and women. But the women on a different bus. Men on one bus. They get us in there. One dude in the Andrew Bynum jersey was tweaking. And I think that should tell you where his mental was for him to have on an Andrew Bynum jersey. But he was on the bus like, we're already handcuffed and he's talking crazy. He's like, I don't give hey, I'm trying to see the twin take me to jail. What y'all up there doing? Playing with each other. Like he's talking to the officers crazy. And I'm like, hey, everybody on the bus is like, Bynum, calm down, man. We cuffed up. We lost. You gotta chill. Like we could talk the shit when we ain't had the cuffs, but they got us now. We on the bus. We sit on the bus in the same spot, right outside my spot, for about 45 minutes to an hour. People are getting out of their cuffs. These are zip tie cuffs. People are getting out of their cuffs. They let everybody on there with their bag, everything in their pocket. I pull my phone out. I'm able to go live. One dude gets out of his thing. He pulls out a vape pen. He's smoking on the sheriff bus.
Wow.
The people in front of us, a dude has a screwdriver. He's getting people out of their cuffs.
Whoa.
We ride to jail. I'm like, they so lucky these kids were peaceful because like it was a kid in my thing had a knife. Whoa. Like, I'm like, if it really would have been like, and now I'm just worried. I'm like, I want to get out my cuffs, but I don't want to get cuffed without my cuffs, and I can't get back in them. You know what I'm saying? My wrist too fat to get back in it, and now I'm like, damn. They like, oh, you tried to obstruct, whatever, try to trump up charge they were gonna get. So took us to jail. We rode to jail. Somebody played Nipsey Hussle on their phone. It was crazy. They took us to Jackie Robinson Stadium, but did not tell us where we were. I asked them where we were. It was in Van Nuys. I said, where are we? They said, we don't know. It's a mobile jail. I said, how are you the police and you don't know where we are?
Wait.
Hey,
they drove you from the Grove to Van Nuys?
No. This is where Paramount is. This is over there.
Oh, okay.
This is over there.
But still, that's still like that's on the other side of the mountains. That's the valley.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So we rode there. We sat in the van for a minute. They let us out. And this is when I kind of learned, you know what? I might need to get a skateboard because every person that came off, like, they were like, is this your skateboard? And I'm like, y'all they get to keep their skateboard? Like, it was the most ridiculous shit I ever seen. They had us out there. They gave us a citation. Then they released us. Luckily, a friend of mine, Kevin Simpson, damn fool, he came and picked me up and took me back. But yeah, it was It was Jackie Robinson Stadium. When I found out the next day it was on the news, they didn't know they were using that stadium for that. And I was like, come on, man. It was so many Jackies. You could have took us to Jackie Gleason Stadium. We could have went to Jackie Chan Stadium. Any other Jackie, but
they wanted it to be that Jackie. Just a huge
inconvenience. And then they dropped everything. My bad.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, it's still a fantastic story, but it also is like, because I love the way that your mind works in the first place. So I'm just curious about like how you have been, just coping in general, like not only with what's going on with the movement for Black lives, but also for, pandemic times, pandemic America.
Oh man, not well. I'm just, I get dressed from the top up. Like
that's real.
I be dressing from the top up, but yeah, I'm falling apart over here. My body's so out of balance. I'm drinking Hennessy and green juice together, so I don't have any balance. I don't think I could get Corona. I think I do too much for Corona to even stick in my body. Like the inside of my body is like Essence Music Fest. That's how I feel. Like if I was to get Corona, he's diving into a river of Hennessy and the clouds of Kush, and it's
okay.
COVID's only 19. He's only 19.
I feel like
oh my God!
You should make a health DVD, man. I feel like it'll be hot in the streets, man.
Everybody, Clayton English. We're gonna say Clayton. Go ahead.
Hey man, no. I wasn't gonna say anything, man. I just want to say this is dope. I'll be watching every day. I like this because I even without seeing y'all.
He's gone. What happened?
Okay,
well,
all right.
Well, that was Clayton English, everybody.
That was Clayton English. I swear he was there.
That was Clayton
what
English. Wow. I hope those cops didn't come back. They're just kind of
right.
like, Curtis Power.
He wasn't wearing his zip ties, though, so yeah, they own him right now.
We're taking you to Satchel Paige Stadium. There should be a stadium named after Satchel Paige, but that's beside the point. Anyway, that was Clayton English, everybody.
That was real cool. Yeah, man. It's so great. He's a talented guy. I think it's really great that he was going and getting involved like that, and that's an amazing experience. It seemed that he had, like I couldn't imagine like going outside my own house to join a protest and end up in a mobile jail in Van Nuys.
Yes.
I mean that's really wild. That's really wild how it can take a turn like that. And I wonder if it would make me look at protests a little different. If I would feel as free to go join a protest if I know that that's going to be the outcome,
Well, the protest in and of itself is, obviously it's kind of evolved, as we've been in this country for a while, which is something that I think we should ask a bunch of different guests, but our next guest will be able to speak to that a little bit too. But before we get to her, I just kind of wanted to talk at Mike real quick about the fact that, I guess I wanted to say that, like, for myself, I haven't been to a protest physically, and some of that has to do with my family and my kids and all that stuff. And I think is it similar-ish for you, Mike?
Yeah, I haven't been to one either. My son is in the high risk group for COVID-19. So I've been very careful in terms of, going places. And to me, the thought of going places, especially that we've been in the house told we can't go anywhere for 2 months. The thought of going and joining 1,000 people seemed really extreme to me, especially given my son's situation. And also another factor is, and I meant to ask Melina Abdullah about this too, is that, like I said, I live in Leimert Park, which is historically
black.
Very black, very proud, and when turn-ups over police brutality happen, they happen right around the corner from here. So it was really interesting to me to see that stuff was happening on Melrose, or stuff was happening in West Hollywood or in Hollywood, and there wasn't much happening around here. Last weekend there was a pretty substantial march that went up Crenshaw, but other than that, it's been relatively quiet over here, and that's been kind of interesting too.
Well, I think some of that has to do with where it is that people need to go to make ourselves heard, a little bit more. So it's kind of like we got to go towards the wealth. We got to go towards where the institutions of government are. But, maybe our next guest can expand on that a little bit. Our next guest coming to the stage. I keep saying the stage because I'm a stand-up comedian and I have the stand-up comedian. I have the SM58, which is the patron saint of stand-up comedy. Microphone in my hand, so it's like weird muscle memory, but especially because I haven't done live stand-up in I don't know how long. Anyway, the next comedian. See,
Wow.
Look at this.
You really got it bad. You got it bad, bro.
Loft, get away from me. All right. The next guest coming to the stage. This person has a sense of humor, but luckily she doesn't let that get in her way. As stupid as that might sound.
No, that's real. I'm gonna ask about that too.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this person coming to our digital stage here is co-founder of Black Lives Matter. She is an artist. She's a political strategist, and she is the founder of Reform LA Jails. Please welcome Patrisse Cullors, everybody. Patrisse,
Hey,
how you doing? I like the jazz
great.
hands.
Thanks for having me. It was good to see Melina's face earlier, even though I didn't talk with her. Yeah.
Is she your homie?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, gotta be.
I don't think anybody knows anybody else. No, I'm joking. Patrisse, we're very happy to have you. Where to start? Mike, you wanna try to start? There's so much to talk
You know
about.
what? I watched a few interviews you've done recently, and first of all, hello, so good to see you again.
You.
I saw a couple interviews, and you used this phrase that people protesting. You said that they were essential workers for Black life, and I love that so much.
Poetry.
So I wanted you to unpack that a little bit for people who might be watching right now.
Sure. I mean, we've spent the last several months in the house, and then all of a sudden we had thousands of people, tens of thousands, on the streets fighting for Black life. And so much of the work of Black Lives Matter has centered around the people who've been murdered, the people who've been stolen from us. But at the center of our work is actually life affirming. We don't want to have to be protesting because another Black person has been murdered by the state or a vigilante. We want to be able to be living in our joy. And so much of the work that we do is centering Black joy, Black life, Black healing. And part of why we step into the streets is because that is an act of those things. It is an act of grief, is an act of healing, is an act of joy. If you come to one of our marches, it's not this somber, rageful march. There's singing, there's dancing, there's reminding people that Black people are actually full human beings. And so as we witnessed grocery store workers, and as we witnessed nurses and doctors, EMTs and firefighters be these essential workers, right? So many of us realize, like, dang, like that grocery store worker is so necessary for us, the postal worker, so necessary. And we took advantage of them up until COVID-19.
Yes.
And right now in this moment, an opportunity to have a new conversation about how Black people are in relationship to this country. There are Black people who are putting their bodies on the line, not just against COVID-19, but against police violence, at marches against police violence.
Yes.
We are essential workers for Black life. It is only Black organizers from 401 years ago through time till now that have allowed for us to be who we are today. So essential workers for Black life, this is not just like a protester or someone, going to go hang out at a protest. We are crafting a new vision for Black people. So that's why I call us essential workers for Black life.
That is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I was making church sounds over here. I was like, wow, yes. Preach, wow. And Ruth noted. Now, I wanted to ask you something because, I feel like I'm getting such a, even though we've never met, you and Mike knew each other before today, but you come off as such a really positive person. It's funny too, because, if people only know you through watching you do your speeches, they're like, wow, she's really serious. I could always see that like humanity shining through. Right. And so there's two things I want to ask you that are in relation to that. You spoke about protests not being these somber things, that they're singing and that there's expression of Black joy. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. Also, it's my assumption, my reading of it culturally is I feel like the conversation about self-care, especially in terms of Black people caring for themselves, I wasn't hearing about that talked about in a mainstream way until the inception of Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
So that's the other, it's kind of like when people talk about Black Panthers and everybody wants to talk about the militarism. And it's like, well, yeah, but there was a breakfast program. It was like building a community, you know? And that's the thing about Black Lives Matter. Obviously, there's a lot of people who are like, ooh, they're terrorists or whatever. But it's not about that. It's about love. And as you have said, I think Black lives thriving. So I would like to hear you talk about the importance of self-care and also how the protest has evolved and the kind of protest that you like to that you think would be an ideal protest, if there's even such a thing.
Sure. I don't know if there's an ideal protest, because I think all the forms of protests are necessary. And in fact, you know, the US is such an interesting place when it comes to protest movements. We have a long legacy of protesting. It's literally how this country, whether it was founded on white supremacy, it was founded on white men who were protesting their right to be able to, you know, develop a constitution. So it's in the DNA of this country to protest, but also globally, that's what people use, and people who are at the margins use to have a voice. It's the thing you do when you've tried everything else. Protest is the thing you do when you try to speak to your elected official and tell them, hey, you know, I'm not getting enough food in my neighborhood. It's the thing you do when you try to develop the infrastructure to get enough food in your neighborhood. It's the thing you do when you try to gather a bunch of people to talk about, hey, should we, we did a town hall. The thing that you do, a protest is the thing that you do when you're like, you know what, they're not listening. None of these people care, actually. So it's important that we hit the streets. And something changes both for the people who are hitting the streets and the people who are accountable to those people. For us, when we hit the streets, that's a form of agency. We have tried everything else to get your attention and to change the conditions for us. You're not listening. So we're going to put our bodies on the line. We're going to call for thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of people to show up and remind you who pays these taxes, who built this street, who built this neighborhood, who built this church, who built this corporation on the block, who built the neighborhood that is a food desert, right? So this is really important for us. And then the person who's accountable, the elected official, has to make a decision. The elected official has to make a decision if they are going to take us seriously. I will argue that for the last 7 years, they have not. For 7 years, since we've started our movement, Black Lives Matter protesters, organizers, activists, artists, organizers, educators have not been taken seriously by local elected officials. In fact, they have just continued to try to give the kind of boring reforms like body cameras or banning chokeholds, which New York City had already banned, and it still killed Eric.
Don't do nothing. Yeah.
So we are in a different moment now where we've said everything, we've tried everything, and now the conversation is about reimagining public safety, which is why the central demand is defund the police.
So we've had to say Black Lives Matter, unfortunately, because we live in a culture and a society that has given us many reasons to feel like they don't matter. And I'm wondering from you, if we're at the tail end of generations of Black Americans who have felt like their lives don't have the proper amount of value, like, what do you think have been some of the effects of that on us psychologically or emotionally?
Absolutely.
Ooh, great question, Mike.
One of the first protests we did for Black Lives Matter was in 2013 on July 15th on Rodeo Drive. It's one of the first times that we didn't take a protest into our neighborhood, because we know what's happening on Crenshaw and King. We know what's happening in Watts and Compton. So we decided to go to Beverly Hills, the epicenter of whiteness. And I remember, all the cops were out, helicopters were out. We were on the steps of Rodeo Drive. People were eating food and drinking wine. And I had this moment where I asked everybody, put your wine glasses down, put your forks down, and take a moment to grieve with us, because you don't have to experience this every single day. That helicopter, this is the helicopter that roams our streets and our communities every single day. Yep. Imagine the psychological impact that has on feeling hunted, because that's what we feel. We feel hunted because that's what's happening. Ahmaud Arbery was hunted. Breonna Taylor was hunted. Ezell Ford was hunted. Riddell Jones was hunted. These are not people who are going into a fight with law enforcement. They're usually running away from. And if you're running away from something, something has to be running towards you with a gun. That's called being hunted. So I feel like we have to actually paint that picture for a lot of America to understand the kind of grief and rage that comes from us. What does it take for a child in Minneapolis to burn down a police precinct? Why would that be the target? Why would a police precinct be the target? That is the ultimate symbol for so many of us for the last 401 years. That is the symbol of hatred, humiliation, abuse, and death, law enforcement. They can't paint it any other picture because that's what we've lived. Right. You can't take our life experience from us. My nephew's first experience with cops, he was 11 years old, running home in the alleyway, guns pulled out of him, 11 years old. So something that does something to your mind, your spirit, your body, and it does something generationally. That doesn't stop with me. It doesn't stop with my child. That's generational trauma. And we have to be, I think the reason why BLM was really the voice around healing justice, we made it popular. That's not our phrase. That phrase comes from a brilliant Black woman, but we made it popular because so much of the history of Black movements have been to deny the pain and the trauma and to only focus on the politics, sometimes focus on art and culture. Like the Panthers did a brilliant job at art and culture with Emory Douglas, but we wanted to elevate the conversation around healing and that it was okay to talk about depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and any other shit because this place has been so bad to us. Right. It is a normal human response to have all of those things. And so how do we heal from that? And how do we do it as a collective? And how do we do it outside often of the medical industrial complex?
That's fantastic. You know, you remind me of when I was in, you remind me of when the events of Ferguson happened. I was at my home and I walked down to my local Coffee Bean. And there was a friend of mine there, Brandon Johnson, the homie Brandon Johnson, and he was visibly upset. I walked in, I was also upset, and we were talking, and he specifically said, "We are being hunted. We are being hunted." And that to take that on as like someone is coming after, because I remember schools with metal detectors. And that the psychological trick. I remember when I went to a school and there was a metal detector, and then suddenly went to a different school and there was no metal detector. Can you guess what the populations of these student bodies were? Absolutely. So it's like that's a thing that comes on us. But yeah, so I was sitting there with my friend Brandon, and I had realized for myself even, I had internalized these deaths as par for the course. Yes. You know, my first reaction was, that's what they do to us. And it took me until, I want to say Freddie Gray, when I was like, I literally threw up. I was just kind of like, I can't take this anymore. And I'd realized in some sort of way how complacent, in a sense, I had been, which is why, again, I want to bring it back to self-care, because a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, for me, has been very helpful, talking about mental health, talking about depression and all of these things, because, you know, I remember Richard Pryor used to have a joke like, we need therapy. He was saying this in the 70s. After what we've been through, we need some therapy. And so I want to expand a little bit on that. But yeah, I guess I just want to expand a little bit on that.
Sure. I mean, you know, I think so much of the conversation, it circles in the conversation of like politics. This is a political issue, right? But this is so much more. This is a planetary issue. This is a planetary fight. We are fighting for the survival of humanity when we fight for the survival of Black people. And I think we need to remind people that as well, paint a picture of what has happened to us and what's been not just on this, not just in this country. I argue there is a global pandemic of anti-Black racism.
Yes.
And it doesn't just impact Black people in America. I've been to lots of countries. And obviously the first thing I'm doing is talking to Black people. I'm usually going to go talk to Black people. And whether it's Australia or London or Amsterdam or Scotland or the continent, or Brazil, Black people are saying thank you for giving us the opportunity and the voice to lift up what is happening to us again. I don't like the term self-care. It is to eat, pray, love. I choose to use the term collective care, because collective care actually pushes and challenges all of our institutions to not just say, hey, must be having a hard day today, go ahead and take a self-care day. Self-care days don't stop white supremacy.
Ooh.
What stops white supremacy is changing your systems. So collective care means that if I'm going to work, my work environment understands the impact of anti-Black racism and how that shows up inside both the workplace and the world, and that there is already mechanisms in place that will think about how my care, my needs, and all the other Black people who work there's needs. I think that's really important, that there's a place and space inside of institutions that are challenging the ways in which anti-Black racism shows up and how we're treated. There's so many, especially young Black folks in entertainment that I've spoken to who are like, my job doesn't get it. They don't understand. And they're the same corporations that are plastering Black Lives Matter on their screens, that are giving Black Lives Matter donations. And yet in the very environment, they're not actually treating their Black staff, Black creatives well. And so that's also a really important conversation.
I was actually going to ask you about that, because you've been able to have successful endeavors in publishing. You've written a book, worked on television. Those environments can be very, very toxic. And I'm wondering how it is that that you're able to navigate those environments and not take that in, not let that erode or bother or affect your values in any way. How have you been able to navigate that?
That's a very good question. I mean, the first way is that, like, if you're asking me to do something, you clearly know who the hell I am, because I started a movement called Black Lives Matter.
Oh, yes.
And so you're not gonna piecemeal me and bring me in based off of like a neutered or a watered down conversation about what it is. So I always make it very clear. Like, if you're asking me to join something, you're asking all of me to join it. But also, I think it's important to name that I don't just go into spaces, I bring people with me. So I always let people know, if you want me, I'm bringing the whole mob, like I'm bringing the whole crew, because that's the way we should do. That's the way we should function. And that's been hard. Let me say it differently. It's been challenging because in a lot of ways, white people are only used to a certain kind of Black people. And it's very different when you're like, no, I'm actually bringing my whole team, like all the Black people, like the former gang members, the folks who are from the hood, like, and that to me is actually really important too, to challenge white spaces, because there could be a bunch of Black folks that all are Black people that are really palatable to white people. And we should be pushing and challenging. And then there are projects where I've had to say, no, thank you. It's going in the wrong direction. This isn't gonna work, not just for me, but for our movement. Whatever I'm doing, it's my blessing and my curse. Whatever I'm doing, it's always to amplify or lift up or situate the movement in a particular way. And so that feels really, really important and necessary. Only a good organizer doesn't build for their platform, they build for the movement. And that's my goal. That's how I was trained as a young organizer.
Wow.
Fantastic. Tips I will apply. I will apply those tips. I did want to also ask about Reform LA gels.
Yeah.
Because, obviously this is an issue that is very much related to policing, obviously. And this, I've been thinking a lot about the word criminal and criminality, right? Because these are very coded words when they're used by, government officials, city officials and stuff. We have to stop crime, all the law and order kind of talk and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, they usually mean Black people. when I hear like, we got to get crime. And so a lot of people, when they're talking about, a lot of the counter arguments, mostly of hot air counter arguments, I might add. But when people are like, well, if you defund the police, crime's going to run rampant, which is them saying, I hear them saying, but you black people are crazy. What if there's no police to keep you under control? What are you going to do? And I'm like, we're going to probably make a park over here and then have a community garden over here. I got some homies that can hook that up. We might play some kickball in the street. I don't know. Sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? But with that, you know, obviously the prison system is a gigantic, I don't even know what to say. I want to say stain. I want to say tumor, you know, on America. Tumor is probably the best way to put it. So you are involved in an organization that is trying to address the problem of prison in relation to all the things that I'm talking about. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think that if we're thinking about the system of incarceration and policing, we should see them as part of a continuum. The police are on one side and the jail is on the other. And the police is the first contact to get yourself in a jail. If you're lucky enough to get to a jail and not end up dying. And if you're lucky enough to stay in the jail and not end up dying, because we have to remember there's a significant, if the police behave the way they do when there's a camera on them, when they know that people are watching, imagine the behavior inside a jail or a prison.
A lot of people have talked and written about that, definitely.
Precisely. So for the work that I'm doing, it really spans across the carceral system, the carceral and legal system. And I want to point to something you named earlier, which is crime, the word crime and criminality. Because the problem is when they say crime, well, there's two things. One, when loitering or spitting or littering is a crime, of course you can use those numbers and those statistics against a community. So the first thing that you have to do is actually legalize a bunch of stuff. Some people are on the camp of like legalize not just marijuana but all drugs. Why is illegal to put a substance in your body? Why is that illegal? And so it's really important that we start to think about all the places in which we have criminalized. We have made it a crime to not have a home, to not have shelter. We've made it a crime to have a mental illness. We've made it a crime to be unable to feed your children, for being poor. So if we start to actually look at all the ways and all the places in which we have criminalized entire communities, most specifically Black poor people, then we have the opportunity to undo a lot of that. We have the opportunity to have another conversation, which is what happens if we give this community access to jobs? That means we have to put money towards that. What happens if we give this community access to housing? That means we have to put money towards it. What happens if we give this community access to free mental health care, access to free drug and alcohol counseling? What happens if those are the priorities instead of policing and incarceration? And so with the work of Reform LA jails, it's on the jail side. What we realized very early on is that there are many people inside the jails, and LA is the largest jailer in the world. Half of those people are inside, more than half are inside because they can't afford bail. And then almost half of the people inside are also have some form of mental illness, dealing with chronic homelessness, dealing with chronic drug and alcohol abuse. So we've created the police as the social service to deal with mental illness, drug abuse, and homelessness. Wow. And then the solution has been put all those people in jail.
In jail, yeah.
So those two mechanisms do not work, and we can prove it by people asking human beings, but we could also prove it by the numbers and the facts. And that to me is, we always have to tell people stories and share how brutal these systems have been, and we also have to back it up with facts. And now what we're seeing in this powerful moment is an entire turn, a turn really America having to turn on itself and say, what have we done? What have we allowed for, and how do we change it? And the defund movement is a call for change.
I know we're wrapping up here. I wanted to just touch on one thing real quick. it might just end up being something you can get your feelings on real fast, and we can move on. But I know earlier on in this election cycle, you had endorsed Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and now that Joe Biden, who we all have lots of feelings about as a nominee, I want to know what your feelings are about this upcoming election.
Complicated. I want Trump out. I also want to hold Biden accountable to a Black agenda.
Exactly.
And I think we can do both. I think we can get Trump out and hold Biden accountable to a Black agenda. He has a really challenging relationship and history with Black people. And I think young Black folks in particular have named it and tried to call it out. And now that he's the candidate, we have to hold his feet to the fire. And it can't just be all, we got to get Trump out, and not hold Biden accountable. I think it's really important that we see it as a complex, challenging moment where we have a lot of opportunity to get this candidate to make promises to us in ways that he hasn't had to in the past.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I do too. It does make me a little worried because there has been a history of Democratic candidates who, for lack of a better term, just disappoint. The Black people that helped them get into office said, I will do and I will do this and make this happen, and then they don't. So my question is, what do you think that Biden would need in place? Is it as simple as his vice presidential candidate? Is it the appointments that he makes? Stuff like that.
Having a vice president that people feel moved by is going to be important.
Stacey Abrams. Sorry, what were you saying, Patrisse?
I've already said Stacey Abrams. I put it in the article and everything when I was
okay.
You got my vote. But then I also think that he's going to need, his cabinet needs to look like a cabinet that we can trust.
His advisors and his policy, all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
When I look in his cabinet, there better be more spices than salt and pepper. You know what I'm saying? There better be cumin, there better be paprika, turmeric. I want to see terms of endearment. I want to see ginger, ground ginger, and regular ginger that you can peel off with the spoon. I want to see all these ingredients being applied to this bouillabaisse we call America.
Absolutely. We need it all.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you about to say something else?
No, I agree with you completely. We need to feel like he's taking the people who are leading this movement and are in this movement on the everyday seriously.
Woo, Patrisse.
Wow.
What a delight having you here.
Absolutely.
You are. I want to be friends with you. I don't know. I'm just like,
I think y'all on the road. I think y'all on the road already.
I love your laugh. It's a laugh that a couple of friends of mine have, so it makes me already feel like I'm close to you. But besides that, I guess I just wanted to say, thank you for all the work that you've done. You know, and for coming on and if I can see, this might not be that short of an answer, but obviously BLM has been around for a little minute now. Yes. So I'm curious in what you have seen in the history of BLM from the beginning to now, like what might give you hope, and what you think is the next steps from here on.
New leadership gives me hope. There's a bunch of new young Black folks and our allies in the streets that are about it. The allied community has come much more quickly this time around. I have to always remember that so many of the young folks that are in the streets right now, BLM started when they were like children, literally, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now they're in college.
You're right. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So there's a whole crew that have been politicized through us for years. And they may have not been able to go to a protest. This was probably some of their first protests. So that gives me hope. And I think something that I want to make sure that people recognize in this moment, this is, to y'all, but also your viewers, is every effective organization and movement gets attacked. And what we were not prepared for the last time around was right-wing attacks that came swift and quickly. And 3 weeks into this uprising, we're seeing it again. There's a significant amount of disinformation and misinformation being led by right-wing chat rooms, being led by right-wing pundits like Candace Owens, and being led by right-wing outlets like Breitbart and Daily Caller. And I am today, World Star Hip Hop put out one of those disinformation videos on their website. And it was embarrassing because you would think that, I mean, although World Star Hip Hop has a lot of problems, you would think that an entity like World Star Hip Hop would actually fact checked before it put the disinformation campaign on. But that's what happens. Disinformation, they're getting more savvy as well. White supremacists understand that they can't be the face of disinformation, that they need Black people to be the face so they can undermine the movement internally. So we have to be diligent, and we have to be very, very, in this moment, we have to be very savvy with what we think is true and what we know is true.
Woof. Patrisse Cullors, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being my second favorite Patrisse. Patrisse Russian is my favorite. I know you thought I was going to say Patrisse O'Neal, Mike.
I did think that.
I do love Patrisse O'Neal, but he might be after Patrisse Cullors in my heart. Anything you want to say, Mike?
I just wanted to say thank you for thinking really big and leading really big. I think it's really easy to imagine all the challenges you're going to run into doing this work and let that stop you from reimagining all that the world could be. So thank you for thinking and moving in a transformative manner. It's very inspiring.
Thank you both. This was beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Patrisse. Patrisse Cullors, everybody. Fantastic.
Awesome.
Woof. I guess now that's it. Is that the show, Mike? Is that our first show?
I think that's the show. I think we did it. I think we did.
In the bag. We would like to thank our guests.
Absolutely.
Melina Abdullah, Clayton English, Patrisse Cullors, Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter. What else do we want to say? Tomorrow we have some great guests. We have two guests that we're going to kind of talk about. We're going to talk about how to deal, and not that we have answers, not that we're like, here's how you deal, is that this is the question we're asking ourselves.
And we're asking our guests, how are they dealing? And,
exactly.
And we're all going to have a conversation about how we're surviving these psychological and emotionally turbulent times.
Yes, indeed. And the two guests that we have tomorrow, comedian and writer who has worked on The Good Place. He's also big on the internet, Demi Adejuyigbe.
Did you get it? You got it.
I don't know if I got it. I said it
sounded so good, though.
I apologize to every Nigerian person I personally know because I know too many Nigerians to mess up a name. Anyway, Demi's going to be here, and also my good friend, author of a book called The Gone Dead, and a professor of literature at Rhodes College in Memphis, Chanel Benz, one of my closest friends that I've known since college. We'd like to thank Funny or Die, and
Absolutely.
we'd like to thank Blavity for letting us do this, inviting us to do this and putting it together with us. We couldn't have done it without y'all.
Letting us talk this shit on their channels.
We gonna talk some shit. That's right. So tomorrow we will see you, and if we don't, that's how it goes.